Hey everyone, welcome to this video about how to navigate within a Linux system and how to manipulate files in a Linux system. Now, I know that you might already know some of these things, but you might have done this through a graphical user interface. So for example, with Windows, you had Windows Explorer and you would click things with the mouse and do it, right? But in this video, that's not how we're going to learn about. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do it with the terminal. Why would you actually want to navigate around things using the terminal? Can't you just use a graphical interface? Well, you're right about that. But if you're working with some sort of a server, if you're working on the cloud, if you're trying to automate things, it is really important to know how to do things using the terminal. Because if you're trying to automate or working in the cloud environment, you're not going to have access to a graphical user interface. So that's why you should know how to navigate using only the CLI. So let's get started. Alright, so in the previous video, I did mention about where all you can play with a Linux system, and today I'm playing around with the Killer Coda instance, which is a cloud environment, and this is where we'll be practicing all our navigation commands. So before I go ahead and talk to you about any sort of navigation command, I want to share a killer hack with you. Now, let's say you're working with absolutely anything in Linux and you get stuck. You don't know how to use a particular command. You have something called as the man pages. Now, in order to use this man pages, all you have to do is type in the command man and follow it by whichever command you're trying to find information about. So, for example, there is one command in Linux called as ls. So what ls does is it just lists all the files and directories within your current working directory, right? So if you want to find information about that, you can simply do man ls and you'll get information to all these different things about the ls command. All right, so that's the man and the ls command done. All right, so now you know what are directories, right? Directories are just folders on Linux. You can get in a directory, you can put a couple of files in a directory, whatever. Now if I do ls, you can see that there's one directory called as file system. Let's say I want to go over into that directory. So in order to do that, I can do cd file system and press enter. Now I'm in the file system directory. How do I know I'm in the file system directory? So for that, we have something called as the present working directory. You can find out what's your current present working directory by passing in the pwd command. And this tells me I'm at /root/file system. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about what the entire file structure in Linux looks like. So I will go to the lowest possible directory, which is called as the root, and it's denoted by a slash. So I'm going to do cd/ I do a pwd, it tells me I am in my root directory. Okay. Now let's list all the files and directories which are inside this root directory. Okay, so you see all these different files. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the contents of every single one of these files. Bin is simply your binary files. So inside that you've got all your executable files. So let's say I cd into bin and show you some of the things. So take a look at all of this. You have gunzip, which is a utility like WinRAR on Windows. Then you have something else such as chmod, which is just to change permissions of a certain file or directory. And you have all these different executable files within your bin directory. Now let's come back to root and look at the boot. So let's go into the boot directory, list everything. Now the boot directory handles how your operating system is going to boot up. So let's say you press the power button on your computer, something is going to happen, right? Something is going to happen. Somehow your operating system is going to know that it has to boot into this particular Linux thingy. And that stuff is pretty much handled by the files which are inside boot. Now there is this thing called as grub, which we'll look into in a later video because that's its own complete rabbit hole. But yeah, The boot directory contains just booting information. Now let's look at the etc directory. So let's go into that and list it out. You see that there are a couple of folders, a couple of files as well. Now the etc is simply your configuration files. So now let's say inside this etc folder, I want to see the configurations of, let's say, my bash completion file. Bash is simply a shell. We'll cover those in a future video, so don't worry about it. But let's say I want to see the files inside bash, the contents of this file called as bash completion. So I'm just going to print it out. And how do I do that? I use a command called as cat. The full form of the cat is concatenate. So it's basically just going to print out all the contents of this particular file called as bash completion. So let me type it out, bash completion, and I enter it. And this is the contents of this particular file. All right. So it's basically just pointing to a different directory. Let's see if I can print the value of this, the file which is in this different directory. All right, there we go. Now these all things which you see, this is the contents of the file which is located at the directory we just printed. So it was user share something, right? Now let's come back to the root, and then you have dev, which is just short for devices. If you want to take a look inside it, it's just got a couple of your physical devices. It's got something like your storage devices, your mouse, your keyboard, Bluetooth interface, Wi-Fi interface, and all those other good things. Now let's take a look at the home directory. So the home directory is where all of your users will be listed. All right. So let me give you an example. Let's say you install an Ubuntu machine and you name it something like Siddhant. I will name it Siddhant because my name is Siddhant. So yeah. So under Siddhant, I will have all my other files. I will have the configurations for this user named as Siddhant. All right. So that will be a local configuration. But all the configuration files which are here in this etc, which is at the root, those will be global configurations. Those configurations will persist across every single user inside this current Linux installation. Then you have lib, lib32, lib64, libx36, which is just different system files. You might know about x86, x64, x32 architectures. Those are just some CPU architectures. So these are just those things, some system files. Now lost plus found, consider this as your recycling bin. Media. Now in case you mount an external drive, like an external hard drive or a pen drive, for example, all those things will get mounted under media. Now MNT, which is short for mount, under this folder, you can mount different types of things. So let's say you connect a new internal hard disk and you just want to see what the contents of that is. So you can use a command called as mount, and then you will specify the name of the device. Let's just assume the name of the device is SATA2 in this case. And then I will provide this mount path that I want to mount this device /dev/SATA2 at /mount path. I want to mount it at this path. So once I mount that over here, all the files which exist within this particular hard drive will be under this path. Now next we have opt. Opt is basically optional. I don't think I need to explain more about this. Now next file we have is proc, P-R-O-C, which essentially is processes which are currently running. Okay. Then you have root. Root is again a user. Your root user, consider that as the admin user who has the most authority within the particular Linux system. Okay. Now these other files, run, sbin, snap, srv, you are probably not going to see these on every single Linux distribution. So we're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore swap file as well, because swap in itself is a completely different concept. Now this sys folder, let's just navigate into sys folder and take a look at what this is. So this is just your system devices, your system calls. Okay. So in this, you have things like your devices, you have your firmware, you have your kernel, and a lot of other core utilities. Then you have temp. I don't think I really need to explain temp. Temp is just some temporary files. As soon as you restart or power off your system, this entire temp directory is going to get erased. Then you have user. Now USR or user just contains a lot of your user configuration files. So let me go into user and show you. So you have another bin folder within users. You have games, you have lib, and a lot of these things you've already seen in root. But most of the configuration files that you as an end user are going to work with will usually be located in share. Okay. So you will go into /user/share, and this is where a lot of your configurations will be stored in. Now the configurations here can be things like your font, your wallpapers, something to do with your desktop environments, your bootloaders, your programming languages, whatever. And the final thing to talk about is var. Now var is just variable information, things that keep changing over a certain period of time. For example, your environment variables. Right now, my pwd prints out slash because I'm in the slash directory right now. So that is an environment variable. Now if I move into, let's say, boot, the value of my pw will change to /boot, correct? So all that kind of information, things that can dynamically change or change based on some sort of actions, all of that will be stored in var. So now we have taken a look at some of the file structures of Linux. Now I want to talk to you about relative path and absolute path. I'm in /root, which is my home. Okay. Now from /root, if I want to go into this folder, this directory called as file system, what's my command going to be? It's going to be cd file system, correct? And if I run a pwd, you can see that I'm in the file system, right? Now, if I am in my root and let's say I want to go back to that file system, cd/file system, do you think this is going to work? Think about it for a second. The answer is no. Why? Because right now I'm in root, and in root, a file or directory named file system does not exist. So in order to go back there, I'm going to have to mention an absolute path, okay, which means I will have to start the entire path from root. So my full path will look like /root/file system, if I can spell it correctly, file system. Okay, and now I'm back to that file system folder, correct? So this is your absolute and relative path. Absolute path is when you have to mention it from your root directory itself. So root, then the subdirectory, the subdirectory inside of that, and finally the file. Relative path is relative to where your present location is. So initially we were present in /root, correct? So from /root, I can directly access file system because it is right there within the directory I am currently a part of, right? So I can just do a cd file system and I get into it without any kind of problems, correct? Now this concept of relative versus absolute path, you're going to need it in some sort of development environment as well. So play around with this concept a little bit and get familiar with it. Alright, so we've spent a lot of time navigating what the entire directory structure looks like on Linux. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can make directories and how you can play around with files. So first, let's look at how you can make a directory. So let's say I want to make a directory over here called as test. I want to put in different files inside it with which I'm going to do something just to show you how it all works. So I will use this command called mkdir or make directory, and then I'm going to name my directory as test. I list it and you can see that I have this test directory. So let's go ahead and navigate into that. Now inside this, I want to make a text file. Let's say I want to call it cities. I want to name a couple of cities inside that. So for doing that, I'll use the touch command. So touch cities.txt. Now, note that when you make files in Linux, you need to manually define what type of file it is. By default, everything will be a text file. Just to make it simpler for you to understand what kind of file it needs to be, it's better to give it the extension itself, that so you can identify whether this is supposed to be a text file, whether it's supposed to be a JavaScript code file, or anything else. Right now, this cities.txt has got literally nothing inside it. I showed you the touch command, the cat command previously. So let's run it on cities, and we got nothing printed because nothing exists within that file, right? I want to add some things into this. Okay, so let's use the echo command. Using echo, I can print out certain variables. So I can use hello world, and echo will print out hello world. I want to send this into the cities folder. So let me just send this. Now, just for now, ignore what these two things are. I will make a separate video covering these things. They are called as operators, but again, I said I will explain it in a different video. Right now, I'm just populating the cities.txt file with some text. Okay, now let me cat it, and you can see that there is a hello world over here. So that's how you can add some text. There is also a text editor called as Vim. But again, if I sit and explain that, this will be a very long video. So I'll do that in a different video. So next, I want to talk about copying files. Let's say I want to make a copy of these cities.txt. How do I do that? I might want to make a copy of that right here itself. So I can do cp cities.txt, and the new file into which I want to copy all the contents of this is going to be called, let's say, towns.txt. Okay, and now I have towns.txt with the exact same contents as cities, which is hello world. Now, let's say I wanted to copy towns, or rather I wanted to copy cities.txt to, let's say, my etc. So again, I would use my concept of absolute path. So I would do /etc/cities.txt, and this file will get copied over there. Let's do it once and see. Okay, and now I'm going to list out /etc/ and over here we should be able to see the cities file somewhere. Now I really don't want to sit and go through every single line over here, so I'm going to use something called as grep, grep, for cities, and there you go. Grep is basically just a text finder. Again, I'll cover that in the same video where I cover all these operators with. Okay, so don't worry about grep for now. All I want you to know is the cities.txt exists somewhere within this. If you want to pause the video and search for it, feel free to. I just don't want to spend time doing that. All right, so the next command which I want to look at is mv. So in the previous command, we copied cities.txt to etc, right? Now I want to move towns.txt to my etc directory. So let's go ahead and do that using the mv command, or move. So I'll do mv towns.txt to /etc. Okay, and once again I'm going to use the grep command to make sure that it's there. I'll list etc once more. So again, if you want to pause the video and find it, you're free to do so, but I will grep for towns, and there you can see that it is over here. And the directory which I'm currently in, test, it's gone from here because again we moved it, we did not copy it. Next, let's talk about deleting files. Now note that deleting files is something very, very dangerous, so just please be careful when you're doing this. So I have cities.txt here. I want to delete this file. I can do rm cities.txt, which is remove cities.txt, and there it's gone into oblivion. Now let's come one folder back, and let's say I have this test folder. Let's say I have multiple files inside of it, and I want to get rid of the entire folder. rm test is not going to work. So what I will do is rm -rf test. This will delete every single file within this test directory, and it will delete the test directory as well. Again, you can see why this is so dangerous. If I explain what this dash is, everything that comes after this dash is what we call as a flag, which is just some kind of an option to change the way a certain command behaves. Now this RF just means recursive and file. So it just means that everything which is within this test folder, all those files will get deleted recursively. If you have an empty folder, which we do right now for test, and you just want to get rid of that folder, you can do rmdir test, which is remove directory. Alright folks, so that's all that there is to know about navigating throughout Linux and manipulating your files within your Linux system as well. I hope you had fun with this Linux video and you learned something new. I have my own community where you can come and join us and talk more about Linux or any kind of tech that you are really passionate about. The link is in the description. And again, I want to give a shout out to my friend Leon. He has a GitHub repository where we are trying to include a lot of bite-sized Linux information. So everything that you have learned in this video, you can go ahead and contribute to that repository. You can add your knowledge to the repository and it can help a ton of other folks. Alright, so thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought about this video and I'll see you all in the next one.